Hey guys, so we are live with our second edition of the Annielytics Hangout, and I am going to start. We had a couple technical difficulties, and so hopefully we've ironed those out. That's always the challenge with starting something new. So I am, in just a second, going to pull up the questions that were submitted ahead of time. This time we didn't have as many questions submitted ahead of time, so I'll have more time to answer people's questions. I believe Tori is sharing the link on Twitter so that people can join. We're also recording this, and so if you missed the first couple minutes, you can check out the recording to see what you missed. So to start things off, let me get my eyeballs. Okay, so someone, let me see here. Let me get to my unanswered questions. Okay, so someone asked the question, what's your approach to aligning segments configured for sessions versus users when analyzing metrics, providing data in terms of both sessions and users? In fact, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Entire screen. Okay, so what's your approach to aligning segments configured for sessions versus users when aligning metrics, providing data in terms of both sessions and users? What's a simple, clear way to explain the subtle discrepancies in this data? I'm going to go ahead and hide this column. Okay, so first off, I kind of have some strong opinions about user data, which I feel compelled to share. I'm not a big fan of user data. If you search for Annie Cushing user metrics, yes, it's my most opinionated post on my blog. And it goes into detail about why I think Google Analytics user metrics are kind of bogus. I really think that they're an outdated concept. So, you know, if we're talking 1998, it made sense to talk about users, because if I came to your site, it was going to be with one device. It was going to be with a laptop. Destiny and Tori, can I ask you to mute your mics, please? And so, but in 2016, so back in 1998, if I came to your site, I came with one device, so I was one user, or what we used to call unique visitors or visitor. And Google Analytics still has both users and visitors in the report, so it gets a little confusing. But they're the same thing. They more recently, just last year, switched most everything from visitors to users, but you still see like new visitors, returning visitors. So you still see hints of the whole visitor metrics in there. They're the same thing. But so going back to 1998, if I came to your site, it was going to be with, it wasn't even with a laptop. It was with my desktop, which sat in my living room. And I was one unique visitor. But the problem with visitor data is I am, for every one of my devices, I'm a different, quote, unique visitor or user. So I'm not going to go back and forth between unique visitor and user. I'm just going to use user, maybe. Who knows? But so if I come to your site via my laptop, I'm one user. If I come via my iPhone, I'm another user. If I come via my iPad, I'm yet another user. And to complicate things further, I use multiple instances of Chrome. I have a blog post on how to do that because I don't really like the other browsers. So I have a Chrome instance for every client. I have one for personal, one for my Annielytics, my work. And so if I come to your site via even different instances of Chrome or different browsers, with each one of those, I am once again a new user. And so that's why I just think it's bogus. I mean, unless you're using a user ID view, which there are complications even with that, because the only way that that view works is if people are logging in. So my site has a login option, but most people who come to my site, they have no reason to log in. It's if you've bought one of my site audit template or my analytics audit template or my dashboard course, then you're incentivized to log in. But most people, they just come, they read a blog post, they maybe tool around a little bit, and then they leave. So the only data that's going to show up in my user ID view, which allows me to track users across multiple devices, are those who are logging in and are logging in across multiple devices. So the main sites that are going to benefit from the user ID view are sites where people are highly incentivized to log in. So banks, airlines, dating sites, any kind of social site, anything like that. People are highly incentivized to log in, and so that data is going to be much more reliable. In my case, most of my visitors who even log in, they're mostly going to log in on their desktop. They're most likely not going to watch my dashboard course or download the latest version of my site audit template or my analytics audit template or my upcoming resource that's going to be coming out in a couple weeks through their phone or their iPad. They might, but probably not. They're most likely going to be on their desktop. So I still won't be able to track them across multiple devices if they read a blog post on their phone or tablet or whatever. So having said all of that, it's actually not that tricky to work with user metrics alongside of session metrics, because even the reports that have user data will typically also have sessions. It's just that the users are going to be a subset of your overall session data. So I personally have a proclivity towards sessions over users because I think that's much more reliable, and I don't like a lot of unanswered questions. But if you are still in love with user metrics, it's really not hard. Where it gets hard is tying in user metrics with, like, let's say, hit-based metrics, such as page views, events, and stuff like that. But the user session, just keep in mind that the user-based metrics are just going to be, if you imagine two circles, one circle is a large circle with all your session-based metrics. So sessions, sessions, time on site, stuff like that. And the user-based metrics are going to be like a smaller circle inside that larger circle. Just helps me not be awkward. So, all right. Moving on to the next question. Let's see here. Where is it? Who are your analytics heroes? To whom, and +5 for using whom. To whom do you ask questions on the rare occasion, it's not a rare occasion, that you don't know something about Google Analytics? I have to say, my main go-to people, if I can't figure something out, Justin Cutroni, Yehoshua Koren from Analytics Ninja, Chris Lee, who also works on the Google Analytics team with Justin Cutroni, or he does a lot with Google Analytics, and he and I used to work together at Sear. Brilliant, brilliant developer. And Adrian Vendor. When I have questions, and Adam Singer, who also works on the Google Analytics team. When I have any questions about anything that I can't figure out, I will typically send out an email, a group email, to these guys, and they are total beasts. I also like them because they're very approachable. Okay, are you able to separate out Facebook traffic that came from a post you made on your page versus Facebook traffic that came from a link on someone else's Facebook page? Absolutely. That's what campaign tagging is for. So when you put a post out on your Facebook, whether it's a page or you're sharing it on your personal Facebook, you should absolutely use campaign tagging. If you're not familiar with campaign tagging, oh, in fact, let me share the link to, or Tori, can you share the links in the Hangout that I reference? Either Tori or Destiny, whoever gets to it first. They are my lovely daughters and part of the Annielytics team. But if you just search for campaign tagging, I come up in one of the top results, and someone will share that with you. But it's a pretty comprehensive guide, and the thing with campaign tagging for social is that it's important to tag those campaigns if you track that, because you want to differentiate the traffic that comes from social that's a result of your efforts versus traffic that comes from Facebook organically. So, for example, if I'm sharing a link to my latest blog post, I just did a blog post on how to use the real-time reports to do testing in Google Analytics, and when I shared that on all of my social networks, in fact, is it possible to pause my screen while I pull something up?
You can turn off the screen sharing for a second.
Okay, let's see here. Let me see if I can pause my screen while I pull something up, because this is kind of relevant. But I don't know how to do that. Okay. All right, now I'm just going to pull something up in, let's see here. I'm going to pull something up in Evernote, because this is what I do with every new post I share. I don't want everyone to see all of my Evernotes. Okay, so to share my screen again. Okay, so here's and if you don't use Evernote, it's one of my absolutely favorite apps. It's the largest hemisphere of my brain, and I rely on it heavily. So anytime I write a new blog post, what I do is I open the blog post in my browser, and I just attach these campaign parameters. So I know that UTM_medium is always going to be social. Make sure you set that to social and not Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. That's your source. And then I put in my source, twitter.com, and name my campaign, whatever's intuitive to me. Since this blog post was about real-time reports, I put in real-time reports. That plus sign will translate into a space in Google Analytics. I only have a hyphen because I have a background in editorial, and I feel compelled to use hyphens properly. But then but I'll just go through, I'll create the first one. Oh, and I also have a Google Sheet inside that comprehensive guide that helps you with campaign tagging, so you don't have to do it on the fly like I do. I just feel really comfortable with these campaign tags. But then after I do one, I'll just go in and I'll switch out Twitter for Facebook, because I already have the .com in there. And then to share it on Google+, I put in plus.google.com. Don't put in google.com. Make sure you get that plus.google.com, and then LinkedIn. And then when I share it on each of my social networks, I use those links. Or, for Twitter, I'll shorten it, maybe throw in some hashtags and stuff, and a note about what image I use. But the reason for this is that, oh, and then one other thing I will note here is when I'm sharing on Facebook, Google+, or LinkedIn, if I drop in that tagged link, I'll get the preview of the post, and once I have that, I go ahead and delete the link, because this is an ugly ass link. You don't want this on your social networks. But all of those, like Facebook, Google+, and LinkedIn, will generate a preview once it kind of catches what's going on there, and then I delete the link. And I just have, I write the text ahead of time, and for those networks, because I'm not constricted to 140 characters, I can, say a little bit more, and I just drop that mechanically. I just drop that into each of those networks. And then on Twitter, because that's a little more ephemeral, I share those more regularly. But anyway, so by doing this, this traffic is going to come in as a campaign. Unlike the rest of my traffic, like if someone else shares it and they don't share that tagged link, like they go to the post and they share it, it's all going to show up in my social reports. So if I go over here to acquisition, all traffic channels, if you know anything about me, this is my favorite report in Google Analytics. And if I go to the social channel, that is going to give me an aggregate of the links I've tagged, or the traffic from the links I've tagged, plus the traffic that's come in organically. If I only want to see my tagged links, and then I would go down here to campaigns, go to all campaigns, and then I can change my medium here. And just look at social. So now I'm only looking at the traffic that's come from social as a result of links that I've tagged. So that's how that all kind of fleshes out. Referrals, I just did a really comprehensive video walkthrough in my last blog post about what the hell is up with social reports, all the little nuances, and even kind of the WTF moments, because there are quite a few of them with the social reports. I don't mean that as a criticism to Google Analytics. I just think we're still kind of in this transition point of where in some reports, like the channels report, Google separates out social referrals from non-social referrals, but then if you go into the referrals report, it's not separated out. So you get social referrals and non-social referrals. And so there's a pretty significant disconnect between these reports. For example, if you look at the referrals channel, or referral channel here, you'll see 1355. But if I go into my referrals, you see 2135. And that's because it's also pulling in all of my social traffic. So anyway, you can watch that video tutorial to learn more. But that, hopefully I answered that question. But that's why you want to tag those links. Okay, next up. Let's see here. What if we reverse the channel grouping identities for more structuring? For example, in the other advertising channel, by the way, I hate that channel. I have a video where I talk about, I think it's my channels guide. So if you just search for Google Analytics channels, maybe throw in Annie Cushing, or if you open up the campaign tagging guide, there's a link to the channels guide, because those are really kissing cousins. Those are companion guides, and you will be so far ahead of your game if you read both of those, watch the videos, and really understand how to use campaign tagging and customizing your channels together. But if you've watched any of those, you know I hate anything that says other. If you see anything in Google Analytics that says other, think junk drawer. I mean, you just don't want that. You want to be as specific as possible. But having said that, for example, in the other advertising channel, use does not contain medium equals organic. Would this work to make sure to drive organic traffic to only the organic channel? No. Don't need to. This isn't like an AdWords campaign where you need to set up, negative keywords. The best approach is to go in, and let me show you how I've done mine. So if I go into admin, and I go to my view settings, channel grouping, please read my guide before going in here. You don't want to modify your default channel grouping lightly because you can seriously bork your data. But here is where you'll go in and modify your definitions. And if anything is modified, you'll see this either user-defined, if that's a completely custom channel, or if I've taken a standard channel and added definitions to it, and then you'll see system and user defined. So I did that under social, excuse me, because sometimes other people will tag links to my site. You really shouldn't do that. It's I say in my guide, it's kind of like painting your neighbor's fence. One exception to that is if you are a site like Moz and you have a significant email list, and like for example, when I'm included, the few times I've been included in the Moz top 10, that sent such a tsunami of traffic to my site that I love it when they tag links to my site, because otherwise most email traffic shows up as direct. But when they tag links to my site, and then I can see that's from Moz top 10, and it brings in a significant amount of traffic. So a new marketing strategy, develop friendships with Mozers. No, anyway, so here I saw that other people were linking to my site and using the medium Twitter or Facebook. Don't do that. The medium has to be social. But I also set this to match as regex so that it wouldn't be case sensitive. And I also said, or if medium matches regex social. That is so that if someone tags a link to my site using a capital S, it will still show up in my social channel. And then here's where you can set or change the color. But that's how you would do that. If you want to create a completely custom channel, like I did with my Google Docs, so I have several Google Docs out there. They're free resources for marketers, and I have links to my site. I don't want that traffic just showing up in my referrals report along with everything else, like from, my site xyz.ru or, whatever. So I want to tease that traffic out, so I created a custom channel. And first I used campaign tagging, and I said UTM_medium equals GDoc, and then I use that to define this channel. And then I set that to match as regex because it's just a good fail-safe measure. So anyway, that's how, and then you just click save. And I go into tremendous detail in the guide what the difference is between you customizing your default channel grouping versus using custom channel groupings, and even how to set up custom channel groupings that's not through the admin section. This is the worst place to set up a custom channel grouping. So I share a little hack how to do that. All right, next question. But yeah, so all that to say, you don't have to do that. Just define what it is. One other thing I will say about that is, like, I don't want to bring up this custom channel. I have a custom channel for affiliates where I just have a concatenated list of all of my affiliates. But you do have the option in these custom channels to concatenate them using a bunch of ORs. So if this were my affiliate channel, I could put in one site and then put in OR, and then medium, or this would be source, matches regex the next site, rinse, repeat, and I think you get up to 20 of these. I actually recommend using the matches regex option and separating them out with the pipe character, because it will process a little faster in Google Analytics rather than having all of these unnecessary channels. And you want to be as precise as possible in these definitions, because the more precise they are, the faster your browser is going to be able to parse this out. Because if you have too much going on, there's the possibility that the visitor could move on to the next page before Google figures out where that traffic is coming from. So if just defining the medium is enough to define that traffic, then don't throw in a bunch of other stuff like, oh, and the source has to equal this, and the campaign has to equal this. If the medium is enough, or the source is enough, or the campaign is enough, then just go with that. Okay? All right. Next question. Single domain has multiple GA accounts, and within some accounts, multiple profiles for subdomains primarily. I know, a mess. Yes, it is. And planning to get everything on a single GA account with views for subdomains. Tips for mitigating loss of historical data. So this is a tricky one. I highly recommend that you check out this post by Lunametrics. They have lots and lots of great resources, and also click through to this roll-up reporting feature. You have to have Google Analytics, I believe it's called 360 now. It used to be premium in order to even do roll-up accounts like this. So you can kind of get around that by using the Google Analytics API. So if you're wanting to be able to, I don't know, maintain your historical traffic, I would use the API, and then in a database, aggregate all of that data. It is a mess, but I'm actually not a fan of using different subdomains or using different profiles or even views to track different subdomains. And I have a blog post on that. I forget what it was called. I'll just say Annie Cushing, Puppy in the Box. Because I remember, okay, here we go. When good data goes bad, an expose on view filters in Google Analytics. So I talk in this blog post about the goal here is, if you think of your visitor as a puppy, you want to make sure that you keep the puppy inside the box, and the box is your view or your property, but primarily view, because usually marketers will separate their site into different views based on the subdomains. Just a second. Could you ask them if they could talk? And so that works if, let's say, you have a site where you have multiple countries that you're serving, and each of those countries has a different subdomain. Then it's totally legitimate to have each of those subdomains in a different view, because the chances are pretty low that someone is going to move from the France subdomain to the US subdomain and then onto the Mexico subdomain. So that's fine. Your puppy is staying inside that box. If they go into the France subdomain, they're most likely going to stay in that. And so it's totally fine to use a different view. And if you have a particularly large site, even to use different properties. Just keep in mind, if you're using different properties for different subdomains, when someone moves from one subdomain, so if I move from the Spain subdomain to the Canadian subdomain, I'm going to come in as a new visitor with a new session, because it's as if those are completely different sites. But having said that, if you have a situation where, let's say, you have your store on one subdomain and your blog on another subdomain and your main site on another subdomain and your help files on yet another subdomain, you really don't want different views, because anytime someone moves from one of those subdomains to another subdomain, you're going to get a bunch of not sets in your view, because that data is still being tracked, because the cookie is moving, from subdomain to subdomain. So there's not a problem there. You don't have to set up cross-domain tracking or anything like that. If we're talking views, if we're talking properties, then yes, you do have to set up cross-domain tracking, because it's as if they're different sites. If you have a different property, it's the equivalent of having a different site. But if we're talking views, you don't have to set up cross-domain tracking or anything like that. It's just that when that data comes in, Google says, okay, there is a view filter set up here. So that would look like this. If I went into filters and I said add filter, I create new filter, and I would say exclude store subdomain. I'd set this up as custom, and I would set this to exclude. And so I could handle this a couple different ways. I could either put in host domain for my field, and I could say store, and I'm not going to get any kind of hints because I don't have a store subdomain, but I could use regex. If you're not familiar with regex, search Annie Cushing regex. I have a guide where I literally take you by the hand and walk you through how to use regex in Google Analytics. I even share like the ridiculous mnemonic devices that I used when I was first learning how to use regex. It's a very like non-techie marketer friendly. But if I put in store.annielytics.com, then the host name is just basically the subdomain. So if I look in the host domain report on my site, this is where you can find out all of the different domains and subdomains that have your Google Analytics tracking code. This is also where you can find a bunch of spam sites. You're not going to see spam sites in mine because I actually have a hostname filter set up that says I only want traffic from the Annielytics, or traffic that, yeah, from on the Annielytics domain to show up. So, so if I go to technology network hostname, these are my host names. So it's just www.annielytics.com. I went ahead and allowed this. I just don't care. But before I set up that host domain filter, I had tons of spam sites in here. Anything that ends in .ru is from Russia, and unless you are hosted in Russia and you're serving a Russian community, most likely those are going to be spam domains. But anyway, but that's why I'm using this host name here. And I would say, well, actually, I'm sorry, I wouldn't use exclude. I would use an include filter. Set this to host domain, host name, and put it in there. You never want to use case sensitive, or very, 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 very rarely. And then, and so then this would only give me traffic that actually hits my store subdomain. But if someone comes from my blog and comes on my store subdomain, then in the, let's say they land on my blog, they come into my store subdomain, in my landing pages report, I'm going to see not set. The reason for that is that Google Analytics doesn't know what that page is because it was filtered out. Likewise, if someone lands on my store subdomain, that's going to show up in my landing pages report for this particular view. But if they leave my store subdomain and go to my blog, or go to my www subdomain, or they go to my help resources subdomain, then in my pages report, I'm going to see not sets. So that's why you want to keep the puppy inside the box. And then I would just click save. You can also verify the filter. I'm not going to do that here because I don't actually have a store subdomain. All right, let's see, any other? Oh, so that covers all of the questions that were asked ahead of time. If we have any questions that have been added in the Hangouts, I'll start covering those. Where do I find those?
Yeah, so Lauren D had a great question. She asked, can you see keyword searches that lead to a particular landing page?
Well, that's a really, really good question. Unfortunately, I actually have to take a hit of caffeine for that question. Unfortunately, yes, before 2011, you could absolutely do that. In fact, if I went to channels and organic search, then I'm going to, the primary dimension that shows up by default is going to be my keyword dimension. But notice here how most of my keywords are showing up as not provided. That's because Google decided a few years ago to take its keyword data and go home. So if someone does a search on Google, whereas that data used to be passed on and it would show up in our Google Analytics report and everything was rainbows and roses, now we have very, very little of that data. And so now we kind of have to piecemeal it together. So Google Analytics is no longer the best resource to use for that. The best thing that you can do is, and I'm going to pause my screen so I don't inadvertently show any client data. Is my screen paused? Okay. And I am going to pull up my Google Search Console and open up Annielytics. Show my screen again. Okay, so the best place to get that data now is to go into search traffic and search analytics. This search analytics report, I have to say, experienced huge improvements last year, like really, really huge. And in fact, I was one of the alpha testers for it, and I did a blog post and a video walkthrough. If you search Annie Cushing Search Analytics, or I'm sure one of my trusty assistants will drop the link in, I think I'd take you by the hand and walk you through the awesomeness of this report, because it's not terribly intuitive how to use it, but I'll share this only because it's the closest we have. It's not fantastic, but it's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. So if I wanted to see, let's see, so there are a couple different ways you can do it. You can look at your queries. So here we have queries that are driving traffic to my site. I'm going to go ahead and, oops, I'm going to change this and get as much data as I can. So I'm going to change this to last 90 days. I highly recommend doing that. You only want to click this radio button if you want to see that data. So now everything is broken down by dates, kind of like the dimensions that we have in Google Analytics. I don't want to do that. I can filter without selecting the report. So I wanted to change my time frame, but I still want to focus on queries. So let's say I see this query here, Google Analytics date format. Now, once I click through, now I have this filtered where I'm only looking at Google Analytics date format, and this is where you see that filter here. Alternatively, I could set up a filter that, and this was one of the best improvements, I could filter queries, and I could say any query, which is just another word for keyword, that contains analytics. So now I'm going to have kind of a broader brush where I'm going to see all of my queries that contain Google Analytics, and then from there I could drill down. So if I click on any one of these, you can drill down to the landing pages that show up for this query. One powerful thing about this report is this is a really good way to see if you have pages that are competing against. So ideally, in a perfect world, you would have one landing page show up for each query, because your site is so uber optimized, there's no question. Google knows, okay, this is the page I want to send that traffic to. In reality, especially with larger sites and e-commerce sites, you will typically see for some of the larger queries, that Google can't really figure out which landing page to send that traffic to. So I've seen even like even splits, like three-way split between the home page, a money page, and a blog page. You don't want that. If you see that, then that's an indicator, oh, okay, I need to optimize my money page better for that particular query. So if I click on this, and now I change the report to pages, so keep in mind if I click on that radio button, now I've changed the actual report, I'm going to see, oh, phew, thank God, only this one page is ranking for that query, and I can get more data by selecting impressions, click-through rate, and position to see what's going on there. So that's the closest we can get. Okay. Next up, Tori, do we have any other questions?
That was for the, yes, we do. Hey, Joe. Do you have any expertise or insights into the Search Console API? I want to get more data that I can distill in Excel, etc., but I'm not super familiar with that kind of thing. This is from Joe.
Okay, I don't. I know that they, more recently, I think in probably the last 6 months, one huge improvement they made was they finally added the search analytics data to the API. So before that, like with one site I worked on, we had an intern who would scrape this information. And before that, like the stuff that you could get from the Search Console API was very, very limited. So I know that they did expand the API to bring in the search analytics data, which I think is, I mean, personally, it's my favorite report in Search Console. And it just works like any other API. You just have to go in and, you know, like figure out what terms they use and stuff like that. I personally haven't worked with it because most of the dashboard tools that I use, they just integrate with it naturally. So aside from Clipfolio, when I was using Clipfolio, I had to actually manually create the API queries. So then I was a little more familiar with how those API queries are actually constructed. But Google came up with this after I stopped working with Clipfolio. So unfortunately, I can't be a whole lot of help with that. But I definitely think it's worth investigating. And partly because you only get 90 days of data here. So there have been a couple times where people from this Search Console team have asked marketers, you know, hey guys, would you like more data? And of course, we all salivate and say, yes, yes, we want more than 3 months of data. Bing gives us, I think, a year for some, I think for their keyword data or query data, whatever you want to call it, and for some of their reports, even more than a year. So Bing is much, much more generous with their webmaster tools. So hopefully they're not just dangling a stake out in front of us and one day we'll have more than 90 days. But until they do, using the API is the only way to be able to capture that historical data so that, you know, if you discover that something went sideways on the site 4 months ago, you're not hosed coming into the Search Analytics report and realizing that it's outside your purview. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, we'll give people a couple more minutes. There was one other thing I was going to say. Oh, well, while we're waiting to see if anyone else has a question, since we're talking about the Search Analytics report, you may be wondering if you've checked out Google Analytics. They do have, under Search Engine Optimization, they have some Search Console data in here. If you go to Search Engine Optimizations, you'll see queries. You'll also see landing pages. So that's the equivalent of, let's see, where was it? the queries is the equivalent of this queries report here. I'm going to reset this. It's roughly the equivalent, I should say. The landing pages report is roughly the equivalent of, where is it? Changing this to pages. But it's not nearly, oh, it's on the same tab. But it's not nearly as good, and I'll share why. So what makes the Search Analytics report in Search Console so powerful is that ability to drill down. So if I'm in the Search Analytics report and I'm looking at a particular query, as we saw, if I click on that query, so if I click on this query here, because I wrote a blog post, now I change the report to pages, I'm going to see the pages. I'll look to see if I'm going to reset this. Who knows, maybe I'll have multiple pages for Annie Cushing. Probably not. It's probably going to be, oh, well, yeah, at least for impressions, all the clicks are coming from are going to my home page. But if I have multiple pages, that's where you're going to see them here. But now you can kind of flip this report on its axis, and if I reset this query and I start with the pages report, you have the converse. If I click on any one of these pages, so now instead of seeing my top queries, I'm going to see my top landing pages. I think that this is all automatically sorted by clicks. If you want to sort it by, say, impressions, you can click on any one of these, and now this whole list is sorted by impressions. But now if I click on one of these pages, I can change this to queries and actually see all of the queries that are driving traffic to that particular page. Very, very powerful. And then you can filter by any number of options here. Like I can filter and only look at the United States. I can also, this was a huge improvement with the Search Analytics report over the, I think it was called a queries report, and then there was a pages tab, and the pages tab was very difficult to even see. It was almost impossible. And they didn't separate out devices and search type really well. The breakdown wasn't intuitive. I go into it with my blog post, but now it's much more like the Google Analytics reports, where I could even separate out desktop, mobile, or tablet, or I can compare devices, and I can separate out search type. So if I see, for example, like I click on a particular query and I drill down to landing pages before I say, oh my gosh, I have 3 different pages and it's like 30, 33, and whatever is left over. Then before I hit the panic button, I can drill down and see, well, wait a minute, are web searches sending traffic to one page and image searches are sending traffic to another page, or video searches, or whatever? So this is where you can play with these filters and get really specific insights into why traffic for a particular query is leading to the corresponding landing page, and vice versa. So if you look at a particular landing page and you see a query in there that you say, well, why is this query going to this landing page? This query should go to this other money page, or whatever. Then you can go in and tweak that page, the other page, to kind of bolster it and better optimize it for that particular query. So, all right. Any other questions? Nope. Do we have any other questions? Okay, nope. Perfect. All right, then Annie Cushing, peace out. Thank you. We will. Oh, sorry, Tori, were you going to say something?
Oh, I did notice that you can't get the devices or search type option in the Google Analytics search engine optimization part. So you can get countries, you can get queries and pages, but you can't flip in between. So you can only narrow down by country, but you don't get that search type or devices.
Yeah, exactly. And you also get a ton of not sets. And so
Yeah.
I know Barry Schwartz wrote a post where he passed on the message from the Google team on why there were so many not sets. I think it was under queries. That's a significant number of not sets. So, I see something like that, and I'm like, thanks, but no thanks, Google. Either make this report or this set of reports useful, or let's not pretend that we are actually pulling in Search Console data, because severing that connection between your queries and landing pages, again, this is just my opinion, but I think it renders it almost completely useless. Because, I can look at it and go, oh, good to know. I am getting queries for SEO Analytics dashboard, but I can't get any of the other insights. And, who knows? I mean, I could be an arrogant ass here. It might be incredibly difficult to pull all of that data in, even though it is an API that we're talking about, but whatever. But it might take a lot of resources. This is a free tool. Let's not be a bunch of ingrates here. But quite frankly, I just never even open this report. If I need these insights, I'm going to Search Console to get the actual data that I can play around with, that I can segment, and where I'm not going to see a crap ton of not sets, which is just, not provided, cousin. So anyway, all right, if there are no other questions, we will see you next month.